This session is started in conjunction to share with you guys as officers about things that you can equip yourself with, and so that we are always in the movement or always constantly improving ourselves as officers to learn more, so that we're equipped better for the ministry and to be able to carry out God's ministry better as well. All right, so before we start, perhaps we can start with a word of prayer. Then we'll continue with Pastor Martin to share with us. All right? Okay, let us pray. Almighty Father, we give thanks to you for this wonderful Saturday that you have given us the time and the energy to come together, Lord, as this one big family, to be able to learn together, to share great things together, Lord. Almighty God, we thank you for your guidance and for your wisdom. We give thanks for really taking care of us for the past few weeks, even though we are stay at home because of the MCO, Lord. But we thank you for being so gracious to us, Lord, and that we are able to continue to be engaged with the members online as well. Lord, we want to continue for you to be with us and guide us in this session and guide our dear pastor and brother Mark Tan as he shared about the youth trends today. May we all be able to learn and equip ourselves for your kingdom, Lord, for the advancement of your kingdom. We submit this session into your hand. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Pastor Mark, to you.
Thank you, George. Can you hear me okay? All right, cool. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you this interesting topic on understanding youth trends today. I want to make a personal disclaimer to say that I am not young enough to be of this particular generation we are talking about. So it's not that I'm a professional of understanding youth trends. It's not that I'm from that generation. I'm going to be speaking from two perspectives. One is that I have attended a course recently that was hosted by Barna Group, which is a statistic research group, which is in collaboration with WORLDVIEW Malaysia. And they were talking a lot about these generations of young people. I'm also speaking as a pastor for youth and young people. So I've noticed some trends and changes that require us to change our strategy in the way of interacting and connecting and making an impact with young people. And it's no longer the same as it was before. So I wonder if some of you have this same experience with me, like me. There were some trendy activities that you guys used to do where it would attract dozens, 20, 30, 40 young people who had never been to church before. They suddenly would love to come, or even your own youth, they will come by the dozens to this one activity. But as the generations go by, you begin to realize, I'm not interested in it anymore. So and then the numbers drop from like 50, 60 coming, in the end only 20, 30 people come. I also wonder, maybe some of you, when you are conversing and discussing with young people, you find it's like chicken and duck talking, you know, and it seems that you guys are not understanding each other. You guys seem to have very different priorities, different information, and therefore different reactions to the environment or to the situation or to the lifestyle or lives which the young people are going through today. I would like to explain some of these things to you. And after the course I had gone through with Barna Group and WORLDVIEW Malaysia, I did some reflection on my own when it came to youth ministry and the Boys Brigade. And to that, I have one warning and one encouragement for you. Let me start with the warning. If we do not think about these youth trends and how to change to at least facilitate to these new youth trends today, we will slowly fall away into obsolescence or ignorance or redundancy. We will no longer be relevant for young people today. That will be my warning. But I will also have to give an encouragement, and that is, I find that the readings of what we find in youth trends today, a good reason to say that the Boys Brigade still remains to be a relevant, impactful, in fact, I would dare say transforming organization for youth and young people today. Never have I seen numbers like this before, which confirms to me that the Boys Brigade ministry is still relevant, relative, and revealing, and just a very suitable ministry for the advancement of Christ's kingdom and the promotion of His character. So without further ado, let me just share with you my slides over here. And here we are. So we're speaking about youth and young people. Youth and young people, and I'm going to be focusing predominantly on understanding youth trends. Okay. So the first thing I want to say is that if you are interested to know more about these details, please feel free to go onto this website, worldvision.com.my/faith for the future, and you'll be able to get a copy of the data that I am going to be referring to. And so all of these data is not uniquely from my own. I did not fabricate this. I did not develop this myself. This was done by a professional statistician group, Christian research group, and they will want to have this material available for all. This is called the Connected Generation. It is a 2020 study by Barna Group and World Vision Malaysia. It gives both statistics for the global dynamic as well as for the local dynamic, particularly in Malaysia. And these will be the two trends that we'll be looking into today. In any research, you will find that there are some disclaimers. We need to acknowledge that there are some strengths and also some limitations to any pool of data that we pull out from. So for example, you will find that this data is research from 15,000 people globally, and in Malaysia, there are 250 participants. The participants in Malaysia, from out of 250, 51.2%, over 50% are male, and about 48% are female. They are from ages 18 to 35 years old. And because in order to take this statistics, or in order to fill out the questionnaire, they require to know English, at least know 10th grade English, so they will therefore be educated. They need access to the internet, so most of these people will be from an urban setting. They will most likely be from those upper B40 and most of M40 dynamics. So they are economically, they're not uncomfortable, but they're not lavishly comfortable either. And some of you may come to me and say, Mark, why are we looking at dynamics of 18 to 35 years old? We are doing ministry from 16 years old and above. 16 years old and below mostly. For pre-juniors is from 6 years old all the way to primary section 21 years old. 18 to 35 seems a bit old. Well, the reason why I will find these statistics to be still very relevant today is because 18 to 35 years old are our current leaders. So I'm talking about actually some of us here in this group today, young people who are officers, warrant officers, trainers, and instructors for our youth today. So it's a good reflection upon yourself. And because you are a leader, you are going to be talking to you guys will therefore be the influencers of the people in the future today. Okay? So you'll be the future today. Sorry, that's my daughter, everybody. Okay. So the influences will go towards the younger generation, and therefore these dynamics will be quite relevant. Now, with this also comes a limitation. So I'm sorry to say, regarding to Orang Asli, Orang Asal, these dynamics might not fit. When it comes to B40, the much poorer group, these dynamics these trends may not be suitable, will not be a suitable depiction of them today. Nevertheless, I'm quite convinced that this group of data actually represents quite a number of our companies today and our area of influence. So that's why I still believe that the data that we're going to be talking about will actually be quite relevant for us in our ministries today. Right, next up. First of all, we want to mention that the generation that we are reaching out to are what we call a globally connected generation. When asked the question whether how they feel about these statements, they say that I feel connected to people around the world. Okay, I feel connected to people around the world, while the blue is the global reaction, 85% they say yes, they feel connected to people around the world. They feel connected to people around the world. 97% of the statistics in Malaysia, they say they are more so, they feel much more connected to people around the world.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? It means that while they're in Malaysia, they still feel much connected to trends and cultures overseas. It could be in the UK, it could be in the US, it could be in Europe, it could be in all the popular cultures, it can be in Korea. They feel connected to that around the world.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, no, I need to teach this, okay? You go on first. The second thing that we see that naturally progresses from there is that they will say that events around the world matter to me. What does that mean? It means not just the politics of a local country, but the politics of another country, the trends of another country, the desires or the works of another, or the development of another country. That matters to the young people today. 95% is the global, 97% is Malaysia. So Malaysia feels more so, they feel more so that events around the world matter to them. All right. So we have therefore a globally connected. We will therefore have a global connection around the world. At the same time, in regards to relationality, this is something quite contrasting. When asked the question that I often feel someone believes in me, the global response is 79%. Yes, I do believe that someone believes in me. 81% in Malaysia, they do. But check this out. I often feel deeply cared by those around me. 73% is the global, 54% is Malaysians. Now, these two information then tells us this. A young person's relationship is 50% likely to be those around us, and the other 50% is in the internet, in the global hemisphere. Because why? They believe that events around the world matter to them. They feel connected to the people around the world, and it is to those international virtual relationships that are those virtual relations are more prevalent in our young people today than it is the locally around them. Which is why when you look at young people today, you'll be very surprised. So one classic example regarding to this relationality and also regarding to the global connection is this. You ask a young person today about Malaysian football, who is in the Selangor team, who is in the Johor team, who is in Sarawak or Sabah football team, you will find that they may not have much of an idea. But you ask them about Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Everton, Ipswich, all these football teams are in the other side of the world, and yet they feel very much more related to those football teams than to our local teams. So it goes to show that their relationality is very much a global generation. So we are actually ministering to a global generation. So our language and our cultural interactions will not just it cannot just be entirely localized, although it does add flavor, or it does add a locality point to our relationships with our youth. We also need to think from a bigger or global perspective. Now, this generation is a very anxious generation. In some indications of anxiety, we will find that when they are told whether they agree to this statement or not, I feel the need to be perfect, while the global feels that, yeah, 30%, definitely I need to be perfect. Malaysians are 35%. So the pressure is there. I feel pressure to succeed. 36% is global, 39% is Malaysian. I am uncertain about my future. Okay, well, which is then half and 40% and 40%. So we are pretty much on the same par as the global emotion. But please bear in mind, the global statistics also includes participants in Africa, and so forth. And therefore, the depth of anxiety of the young people in Malaysia is likened to the world settings, or they feel very uncertain or feel very anxious about their future. They don't know where to go. They don't even know what opportunities that are available for them. So this is one part that they're anxious about. Second thing is that you will see, other things you will see is that I feel there are not enough opportunities for me. So globally, they'll say 23%. Yes, they all agree. I feel there's not enough opportunities for me in where I am or even around the world. Malaysians are 31%. Wow. Okay. So there's a large jump there. I feel lonely and isolated from others. While the global position is 23%, Malaysians, 25% of them feel isolated. Now, don't you find it interesting that even though they are so globally connected and their relationships are also globally based, they still feel somewhat lonely and isolated? They also feel that there are not enough opportunities because they always see that the grass is greener on the other side. Have you also noticed that that the local pressure around their home, so that means from their parents and from the school pressures, is still very prevalent? I feel the need to be perfect. I feel pressure to succeed. I'm uncertain about my future. So these add to the patina as to who are these young people and what are they facing today. So that's why we see at first, emigration would have been a good idea. It feels like a good idea for these guys. Going into the cyber world or into the dark web, that is very tempting for them. And so these are the things that we need to be careful with. And that's why still, even though they are a globally connected generation, they do notice or they feel a sense of emptiness in their relationship building. So you see how, so I already given you a hint as to how Boys Brigade can really impact these young people. All right. Now, we usually think that the young people today are very skeptical of people of their faith. Some are very secular, or they say they're atheists. I don't believe in God, and we think, oh, that's the trend of the world today. Well, as it is true in the world, it's not so much so in Malaysia. Okay, so if we see here, I am actively working to grow my faith. 34% of the global dynamics says yes, I'm actively working. That means 66% is not. Whereas in Malaysia, 40% I'm actively working to grow my faith. While 44% of the world's statistics or the world's data says that faith is very important to me, in Malaysia, it is still 60%. So we still have a vantage point where the young people are saying, yeah, spiritual. I feel like a spiritual person. I may not belong to a particular religion, but I feel religious. I don't agree to be part of a religious institution. I'm more of a spiritual person. So we are hearing these statements trending more and more in this young generation. Now, of course, then we might ask the question, why is it that they are so much into faith, but not so much into church or even religious institution? Well, it's unfortunate, but before that, let me just share. In terms of believing in spiritual forces, the global position is 47% definitely believes, 28% says I think they exist. So if you give the benefit of the doubt that I do believe that they exist, the global perspective is 75%, whereas in Malaysia, 64% they are certain that they exist, 27% are thinking. So that means 91% of the Malaysian dynamics, they do believe in spiritual forces. So only 1 out of 10 are they do not believe that the spiritual dimension exists. 90% in Malaysia believe they do. So that, I believe, is very encouraging for us to say that, there is still a space to talk about faith and spirituality. But again, the question comes up. What is it that, why is it that they are so into spirituality, but not into religion, not into faith, not into coming to church? Well, unfortunately, there are a number of dynamics, and the indication shows that it's there. Now, in questions of leaving faith, this is particularly to Christians, check out the millennial generation of the global stage, 57%. Now, this is happening more towards in Europe and in the Western world. Malaysia, we still have an advantage, 34% are leaving the faith, but they are leaving the faith not because they are no longer spiritual. They are not leaving the faith no longer because they don't believe in God. They are leaving their faith for other matters, and there are quite a number of different dynamics. Now here are a few trendings. Again, the blue color here is the global trend. And then the dark red, this is Malaysia, okay? So let's see what are the major highlights which the young people are most skeptical about. And we find that, okay, hypocrisy among religious people, over 20%, that's quite high. The question on human suffering, that's a very important thing to think about. The idea of the conflict in the world, so religious crusades and religious global agendas, and the notion of human suffering and the conflict around the world, these actually affect our young people more than we think. They have an argument for history, which basically say that, you know, seeing how religion was manipulated to harm people, that's why I'm very skeptical about, you know, different people having particular statements of faith. All right, and then some key indications of doubts. One of the key indications of doubt is that their past experience with religion. So that's very relevant to history. So not only was like, oh, I take a third person view of our church history. No, I also take a personal experience. So my experience with religion, I feel I have doubts with them. Okay, and believe it, check it out. My family is causing me to have doubts. Now it could be because of hypocrisy or indifference within these families. You know, they don't see the faith in their family, they're not going to continue. And as soon as they turn 21 years old and they're leaving the house, you will find a lot of the young people, they leave the church, they don't find the church when they go to university, only because the relationship and the reality of faith was not established in a household well enough for them to take it with them when they go to their next stage in life. And nothing, well, this will be the faithful, I suppose, no doubts, or they haven't really thought about it. So some things to really highlight: the question on human suffering, which then drives a trend of the young people today in another angle, which we need to look at. You see history, we see past experiences, sometimes pertaining to family. So these are the areas, and religion and science. See? Now, the purple color is Singapore, the pink color is Indonesia. So you see human suffering is not an issue to them, but it is an issue to us in Malaysia. So these are some nuances that we need to make sure that we address things differently to our young people as compared to our neighboring brothers and sisters. All right. Now, as much as they are skeptic or they are a doubtful generation, they are a willing generation. Okay. What I mean by willing, they are willing to do something about it. They are willing to make a change. Okay. So in certain areas that they are concerned about, the dynamics which Malaysians are most concerned about are corruption. So it may have something to do with our recent political situation. Natural disasters, so 24%, whereas Malaysia, we are also very much concerned. Pollution, we are very well educated. And racism, you know, in Malaysia, 32% global, they are concerned about, where in Malaysia, they are very much more concerned. Okay, so they find these burdens and passions in their heart. And they are willing to do something. So you notice, guys, in this set of data that they picked up, they have found out not just that whether they are willing or not, but have they done something? And they found out that in the last 3 years, these young people have done so many things, and often above the global expectation. So while 36% of the statistics signed the petition, 37% Malaysian, while 30% donated to local charity, 46 of the Malaysians do that. So that's a very large gap there, very large lead there. 24% they volunteer to serve locally. That's the global dynamic. 37% in Malaysia. 20% around the world they feel they can raise awareness for meaningful cause. Malaysians are 24. Donated to national charity, 13% as compared to Malaysia, 23%. 10% as compared to 16% for international charity. 6% as compared to 4% Malaysians have taken an international trip to volunteer. 6% of the Malaysian dynamic, as compared to 3% globally, have actually lived internationally as a volunteer. So we have a very willing generation. Want to make a difference, want to make a change, want to go the distance to do that adventurous leap of faith to make a change in this world. So they're a very willing generation. Sadly, or something very interesting about our Malaysian statistics is that only 3 areas Malaysians did not exceed the local expectations. Number one is that one was that when it comes to sponsoring a child, 10% of the global global dynamic or the global data, 10% of the global data are willing to sponsor a child, whereas Malaysians are only 7%. This could be possibly because of due to economic constraints, and our currency may not necessarily help as much. 9% are willing to donate it to a Christian charity, as compared to global expectation of 15%. So that also equates into our to skepticism of the church. But one thing very encouraging that we can see is that 23% of the global data have done nothing, whereas only 17% of Malaysians in the data have done nothing. So that means the young people's generation are very, very willing. Okay, right. And when it comes to relationship of the church, the local people, the Malaysian people, they say that the church actually has a role to play in inspiring them and growing in leadership and in volunteerism. Okay, so they feel while the global position of the data is that I have been inspired to be a leader, an example is by someone in my church, 26% is the world, 32% is Malaysian. So they still really trust, 32% still really trust the church to find leadership by example. And while the global data says that only 21% feel they have access to leadership in training and ministry, Malaysia is 32%. So that means the local community or the local church depend on the church for access to leadership training for ministry. And I bet you one of the larger part has to be ministries like the Boys Brigade. All right. At the same time, as much as they feel like the resource is helpful for them, one in 3 of the young people today does not know where do they fit in as a leader. Okay, so while they agree, if they're married, okay, their family, in their workplace, okay, yeah, they feel their sense of leadership. Check out in non-profit, check out in church, only 7%. In fact, from the data, 10% feel that they have some sort of leadership ability in government as compared to their own church and non-profit. So there seems to be a gap here where the young people feel, yes, the church and the local organization is something that I can participate hand in hand, but I don't feel looked upon as potential future leaders. So there's something that we're missing out in this particular dynamic here. Okay. All right. So looking at the data, what is it that we can see? We have a global generation. They are very much interested in the things around the world. World problems matter to them. At the same time, they feel very lonely. They feel disconnected from the community around them. They rather be connected virtually. But at the same time, they do not feel entirely connected to the people. They feel that global or virtual connection does not satisfy their relationship development, and the anxiety still just adds on. They are willing to do something. They want to be challenged. They want to try something. They want to be part of the solution to make this world a better place. At the same time, they don't think the religious institutions today are part of the solution to the problem. Okay, and not only that, those who still feel that they see the church, or they feel that the religious body can do something to make this world a better place, majority of them feel, I don't think I'm called to leadership. I don't think I'm your next in line. I don't think you have confidence in me to be your next line of leaders. I wonder if that sounds very familiar to some of the companies here. Here are some things which Jim Burns, he's the author of Uncommon Youth Ministry. He says there are some major topics that we must address regularly and relationally, and we must be very clear to them. Otherwise, these topics may make the church and therefore the boys' brigade feel either irrelevant, or they feel disconnected, feel condescending. The first one is to talk about gender and identity. Sex and gender identity is a very hot topic among young people today. Okay, not just 18 to 35, I believe even 13-year-olds, they're asking these questions also about same-sex marriages and gender identities. Now, we may think, oh, you know, we're Malaysia, majority Muslim country, it's never going to come to us, it's never going to be a problem. But already in our neighboring countries, we are seeing snippets of the future, which we thought would never happen. It might happen. So one example is our neighboring country, Taiwan. So in 2019, the Taiwan Parliament has legalized same-sex marriage. They are the first country in Asia to do it. And then shortly after, uniforms in certain schools in Taiwan are now equated to be gender neutral. What that means is that boys and girls can interchange their uniform accessories any way they want, including girls to wear trousers, sure, but even boys to wear skirts, it's allowed. Because why? They are already pushing the idea that both sexuality and gender identity are fluid. Now you may come up to me and say, Mark, that's Taiwan, Mark, you'll never come to Malaysia. But let me just say this, especially for those Chinese churches, you know where I'm going with this. Where do we get a vast majority of our Christian theological and Bible study materials in Mandarin? Majority of our stuff are from Taiwan. Can you imagine if all these materials are coming from Taiwan, and yet at the same time in their own hometown, in their own home ground, they cannot seem to connect or be able to transfer the knowledge about sexuality and gender identity to make an influence to the people in Taiwan. So if they are having trouble in Taiwan, you can be sure Malaysians, we will, or we are already having troubles today. So we need to find a finesse or a nuanced way to describe our position regarding sex and gender identity, even in our ministries today. Of course, that may seem very awkward, but I will give a teaser statement about the next talk that I will give. It's not about the data. It's not just about the facts. It's not just about the theology. It's a lot to do with the relationship. How you connect with them with the data, with the information, you must connect with them with the relationship. So that's something to think about. So this is from Jim Burns, the person I quoted earlier. Here's a quote from him. He says, "It's time for the church to provide a healthy view of sexuality and teach honor and respect for relationships with the opposite sex." I repeat, it's time for the church to provide a healthy view of sexuality and teach honor and respect for relationships with the opposite sex. This comes from Jim Burns' material back in 2008. And 12 years down the road, we are still not making very much headway on this topic. I think this is something that we need to look into. All right. This millennial generation has a very different approach to worldview. It's pretty much upside down. For the boomer and for the Gen X generation, therefore a lot of us today, the main characteristic is objective truth. Truth is objective. And so I find the truth, and then based on the truth, I can apply my morals subjectively. So that's why, for example, the truth of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, the forgiveness of sins, the repentance of the repentance of people, tells us today, would then prescribe to us how then should we morally live. And you'll find it is very variant, but it's okay. We are connected by the one truth, and then the morals then open up to a vast array of confessions and applications. Okay, so that is the boomer generation, that's the Gen X generation. This is the generation I feel mostly resonating to. I believe truth by definition should be objective, and then how I practice in my morals is very subjective. There are plenty of options, take your pick. Now, the millennials, you see how these things turn upside down? For them, morals are objective, then truth is subjective. Now, this is very telling. The millennials and the Gen Z will not believe in our truths unless we first display in our moral act of living. That's why, like the previous topic of sex and gender, sexuality and gender identity, how do we treat them? What's our morals? That must be said. Then only they can believe in our truth. Are we giving to the poor? Are we volunteering? Are we being proactive when it comes to topics of social justice, poverty, global problems? Only when we pass the millennials or the Gen Z's objective morals, then only they'll be open to their truths. This also shows why you will find interfaith or at least interdenominational participation helps a lot. It adds credence to our stand. So even though we may come from various traditions, if not from different religions, at least different traditions, like whether we are Catholic, Methodist, Anglican, Lutheran, or Baptist, the fact that we believe in discipline, self-respect, obedience, and we also teach community service, first aid, citizenship, these are good. These are objective. These are good signs of millennials and Gen Z objective morality. Then they're willing to listen to the truth of the gospel, or truth of the worldview. Very, very telling, right? So in conclusion to that, I would then propose that the Boys Brigade makes for a wonderful platform for a relationship to be built based on the moral compass of doing things together, maybe to reach out, to connect to the local community, to do community service, to do citizenship, to teach first aid, to be involved with the local community around them, to talk about global problems and how we can be a part of it. The Boys Brigade can be a good long-term platform of relationship to do something, to make a change, and in that we are able to share the gospel. So in all this data, here's what I'm saying. The Boys Brigade is a very relevant organization today with much potential. The only thing that we need to do is that we need to tune our approach to BB activities and our BB program and relationships, making sure that our relationships to our members with our members are authentic, they are transparent, they are truthful, that it relates to the global problems, and therefore the Boys Brigade can be a global solution, and the thrust behind that therefore can be based on the truth of the gospel. All right, so more about relational youth ministry, I will talk about that in my next talk, but I hope that this data gives you some time to think like, wow, okay, yes, so global connection. That's why a lot of if companies who are doing Zoom meetings or doing online meetings, you find, hey, you know, we find a very dynamic shift going on among our young people. And then for those who are for Boys Brigade, for BB officers who are very much interacting with social justice, community service, and they are relating their young people together with them, wow, you know, you will find that they are very much willing to do something and participate and maybe even believe in what you say. All right. So these are the youth trends today. I'm happy to repeat some data if maybe some of you didn't catch it. And after this, I'm happy to answer some questions that you might have based on this data. So that's my presentation today. Thank you so much for paying attention for all this while. I now pass the time back to George or David to lead into the next session.
All right, thank you very much, Pastor Mark, for the very informative sharing session. So I think someone has posed some questions, and I have posted to your WhatsApp as well, Pastor Mark. You can take a look at it, then you can help us to answer for it as well.
All right. Okay, so first question. Here's a very good one. Can you please help me to elaborate something about the youth trend during MCO period? Okay, so this is very interesting. Based on the interpretation of this data, all right, it is no wonder when it comes to MCO period, the transition from going to a physical location to a virtual location like company parade or online schooling is actually something that the young people from ages 12 and above are very excited to do. Okay. Now the only problem that we have, and I hear this a lot from teachers who had to change from physical schooling to virtual schooling, is that it's a very different discipline of presentation. You cannot do the same thing anymore because why? There is no physical or material connection to the person. It is all purely virtual, and that's why some of us may feel very, very lost, while some of us may feel, hey, you know, I feel very much connected. Well, if you feel very much connected, that means you've been very much relating a lot to the current young generation. If you're not, that means it's a very steep learning curve for us to think of to do in order to be relevant to today's young people, especially when they are very much disconnected locally, but very much connected globally. All right. So we are now competing with global material, global presentation, global trends. It's a very steep challenge, but the relationship platform that we have as Boys Brigade, that enrollment spirit, you know, to desire to be a member of the Boys Brigade and to hold on the promise and to promise to obey and reach out to the standards and to the advancement of Christ's character on which our organization stands. That firmness is what will bring the young people to be more passionate about the Boys Brigade in the midst of this MCO. All right. Let's see. Because I think their works might change this. Because I think their works and mindset also change, and they will ensure will feel insecure, especially the young generation. Okay, so you are right. That's why some young people, they often, especially for quite a number of companies, I noticed, your members might not come from well-off families. So that means they don't have their own access to internet. They don't have their own phone. So they will have to share their computer or internet with their parents, and therefore they are struggling for time. And so therefore their quality of time when they go to the screen, they have to make some choices. So the challenge therefore is that we have to find a way to convince them that spending time as a Boys Brigade member online, virtually, and distant relationship is still will still convince them to participate and have more time. Okay. There was a comment. There's a comment here that the bar charts are not in proportion. Yes, it's true. It's not in proportion. But only because my objective is to show the distance, the significant difference between one global data and the local data. Okay, So that is still, so that way we can pay more closely to attention to the difference and therefore either see the threat or the opportunity that we can have among young people. If I put everything to 100%, then the data will not be as clear. So that's why I put it in different proportions. All right. Does the data cover East Malaysia? So yes, 30%, 30% to 40% of the data came from Sabah and Sarawak, but it's from Kota Kinabalu, it's from Kuching, it's from the major cities, major townships. So that's something to consider. Let's see. Some companies. Okay, so yeah. The other question: is there any symptom the behavior of male and female are starting to interchange, where the females start to behave like male and males start to behave like female? Okay. All right. So, okay. So, I give thanks to God that Boys Brigade has been very much the pioneer of gender egalitarianism. What is gender egalitarianism? Gender egalitarianism is that we recognize that there is male, there is female, but opportunities are equal, albeit the outcome might be different. Okay. Okay, so let me repeat that again. We believe that there is male and there is female, but opportunities for them should be the same, although outcome will be different. What do I mean by that? The medical field is one good example where opportunity is available for both. Okay, and you will find in some countries, majority of the doctors are female in outcome, although opportunity, it was first a male-dominated profession, but now more females have taken over, not because that we force the outcome for women to become doctors, but we've now created equal opportunity and have found that actually that there are potential for women to be doctors as much as men, or even if not more. This will vary. This will be different, like for engineers, but the opportunity for engineering is the same. The degree is open for both, but you will find most engineers are male because of the outcome. Now, what changes to a point where it says that where a girl may identify themselves as men or men identify themselves as female, this will be the drive this will be the agenda of liberal theology, of feminism, and still based on the idea that they feel like, oh, equal opportunity is not enough, I want equal outcome. And equal outcome also therefore equates to, male and female, their gender roles, and therefore gender identity is fluid. So instead of like housewives and go to work dads, go to work husbands, there are now stay-at-home dads and go to work mothers. But hey, why not there be go to work fathers and stay-at-home fathers living together, both gay, and they take up children? Oh wait, let's switch that around. Maybe if sexuality can be so fluid, why not gender as well? This is something that the Boys Brigade cannot subscribe to. This is something that we need to be cautious. So the reason why I say Boys Brigade was the pioneer in this particular movement is that while Pandu Putri, Cadet Putri Islamia, St. John's, quite a number of the uniform organizations only recently allow girls to wear trousers as part of their uniform, whereas for Boys Brigade, we have allowed girls to wear trousers since as part of the uniform body from the get-go, from as early on back as 1980s. So that is something that was an advancement for us. Now, the addition for skirt as an optional thing, well, that's an optional in terms of tradition. But first and foremost, Boys Brigade, we have been very egalitarian in reaching out forward. Let's see. What are your feelings on the trend of young people embracing a nihilistic philosophy and outlook on life, especially in regard to global issues such as climate change, racism, and etc.? Okay. First of all, we have to first of all, we need to answer the question, what is nihilism? Okay, the definition of nihilism is not coming to my head right now. Let me just take a quick look at my dictionary. I remember reading about it. Okay. All right. So the trend. Okay. So I get it. So nihilism basically is a denial of religion and objective truths. Why did they reject the idea of objective truths? Is because we can all look at the same data, but then have different interpretations. This is what they think. Okay, but that's only because in nihilism, the only prescription to life based on the data is based on the individual's interpretation. Now, because there is still a collective, there's still a collective agreement in terms of morality. So no nihilistic community will ever say that, oh, in order to ensure that there's enough food around the world, we should let COVID-19 spread around the world, kill hundreds of millions of people, kill hundreds of millions of people, and therefore everyone has enough food. No, they won't believe that at all. They still have certain things. They still have a certain moral principle, in this sort of framework and structure. I would say that nihilism, especially in Malaysia, is not sincerely nihilistic in the sense that, like I said, based on the data, it's not that they don't believe in God. They do believe in some sort of spirituality, but it's now the religious institutions that they don't trust. And this is something I believe, even for me as a pastor, I need to establish and re-establish trust in this generation so that they may build more confidence in wanting to participate and be part, not just in the faith of Jesus Christ, but in the community of Jesus Christ. And again, that's where in Boys Brigade, I feel they can do very, very well. Okay. George, that's all the questions that you sent to me via WhatsApp. Is there anything else?
There is one more question. Let me WhatsApp to you.
Okay, to Mr. Bong, may I know what's the survey sample size? The global survey sample size is 15,000, of which in Malaysia is 250. In Malaysia, 250, 51% of them are male, 48 point above 5 is female. So it's a good male-female ratio. Majority, 60% is from Peninsula. The other 40% will come from Sabah and Sarawak, although predominantly from the major cities like Tawau, Kota Kinabalu, Cebu, and Kuching.
All right. So thanks, Pastor Mark. So I think we'll just open one last minute for one last question. If you can, you just post it in the chat. But after that, if not, then we will proceed into the polls. Mr. David, you are ready. Yeah, right? Okay, any more questions? Thank you, Pastor Mark, for sharing and for arranging this webinar.
Most welcome. These slides will be available after this seminar so that you guys can take it back. Please note that this data, in terms of its shelf life, meaning how relevant it is today, less than 10 years. Yeah, less than 10 years. And in fact, with this MCO, we will also then find some dynamic changes because of this very unprecedented experience that we're all having today.
I'm sure the trends, there will be some effect onto the youth community for sure. And one more questions. I noticed that more and more members are on the virtual world. They prefer to lock themselves in their own world instead of world outside. What can we do to overcome this?
Okay. thankfully, the virtual world, because it is non-physical, therefore it is to a certain extent a false world. These things, the world in itself will convulge or convolute within itself, and it will die, and it might die out, and that's actually the more troubling part for us, but also the opportunity for us to either prevent that from happening, or to save them, or to respond to them more urgently. And that is this: when their world, let's say their virtual falls to pieces, because why? We have things like cyberbullying, we have things like virtual shaming, we have things like nitpicking. Even racism happens not just happen in the real world, but in the virtual world as well. So these things will harm them, and the best thing that we can do is to add into our language and add into our dictionary. When we want to address problems, we need to address the virtual world, not as much, but at least some. We need to address some issues regarding to the virtual world, as much as we are also talking about the real world. And thankfully, when it comes to comparing virtual world and real relationships trumps virtual relationships every single time. That's why you will see such a large missing point, that even though 97% of our young people are globally connected, only 37% of them feel that they belong somewhere. This goes to show that that direct connection relationship is still relevant, and that's why Boys Brigade officers and NCOs, we need to make sure that when we relate to our young people, it is very real, it's very transparent, it's almost like adopting them. Then they will feel a sense of ownership, a sense of belonging in the community, and that's why when the virtual will naturally just disintegrate, either into is no longer relevant, or it is no longer trending. You know, some people had developed a full-on Facebook empire, but then later they found out that Facebook is no longer relevant. Now Instagram is the in thing, and behind the thrust of Instagram, there's TikTok and Snapchat. So people who develop their own little virtual worlds or kingdoms there, you'll find that these things die a lot faster, and henceforth their purpose. The Boys Brigade can come in just like the local church, but I think even more effective than the local church, to establish that real relationship, so that all these virtual relationships may die, but their real relationship will keep them alive and well.
Yep. Pastor Mark, thanks for sharing that. And may I also allow myself to add on to that, that I really agree with you, especially when like looking at this question of locking themselves in the world instead of the outside world. I see trends as a form of relational languages, and that the core relations, the need for relationship doesn't change throughout generations, I believe. It's just how we relate to them, the language, the way we do it changes across different generations, and this generation is the means of virtual world. And at the same time, also, I think we should also look at the root why they are locking themselves in the virtual world instead of the outside world or the physical world per se. That comes with the relationship that is built. Okay, so that's my take on it. And also, Pastor Mark, the next question, and I think the last question would be, what is the best response to the member whose parents believe in BB activities are against tradition? For example, services, praise and worship, etc.
Okay, this I find to be a very confusing. I find this question to be confusing, not in the sense that I don't understand the question, but the data tends to show that these instances are a little bit of outliers. And the reason, and what I mean by outliers is this: I think less than 10% of parents of Boys Brigade in Malaysia asked the question about participation in religious traditions. So enrollment service, praise and worship, Bible study. So not many of the not many parents whose boys or girls are in boys brigade are concerned about that. And if they were, but if they are, therefore our response needs to be a bit more, what's the word, politically neutral. Okay, so therefore the answers will be very similar to like talking to a full-on non-Christian family from top to bottom who might be skeptical about religion in general. Then the Boys Brigade comes in, and that's why it is important to notice that the Boys Brigade identifies themselves as a threefold identity: Christian, youth, uniform, organization. Okay, now Christian, instead of trying to justify the traditions which we follow, which is enrollment award service, Bible study, and praise and worship, let's talk about the simple fact that last time in old missionary schools, there was chapel. There is still chapel in some missionary schools, that there are still prayer traditions, that there are still these things which are nuanced, they are nuanced in their perhimpunan and in their day-to-day activities, and yet there doesn't seem to be a problem. Boys Brigade is actually from those old school traditions where we do have some of these adherents. Okay, number one. Christian organization can also then mention that on top of these traditions, we also need to pump in a lot of our social charity. Okay, so the reason why last time missionary schools were very much welcome in the community is because while the school provides education, the nuns or the sisters or the teachers of the organization, during their spare time, they will do charity. They'll visit the houses. They will do soup kitchens. The presence of the Christian tradition is more than just the service and the organization. It has to do about action and charity as well. And this answers a lot more so to this millennial generation and their parents. Youth organization. So nowadays, parents will be willing to take their young people to do anything so long as they can see the benefit of how it will benefit upon their youth, on their young children. So some examples, they take taekwondo, they take martial arts, and they have some religious nuances, but we're happy for them to take it anyway because, oh, it builds some discipline. Last time for Christian schools and for youth fellowships, young parents will be willing to throw their young people into there and do Bible study because why? Oh, they learn English very well in churches. So these are some things that is still very much relatable today, and we need to think much more carefully. We need to be able to give them more good answers for the Christian tradition so that they don't raise up the question regarding Christian traditions, thinking that it's irrelevant or it might be very contrasting to tradition in Malaysia.
Okay. I hope that answers the questions, and I hope that this session has been beneficial because I think in terms of time, we will have to end the wonderful sharing here. And once again, we thank Pastor Mark for sharing with us such an informative presentation.